Hello students, today we will be looking at the last presentation in this series on the architecture of Le Corbusier, which is part 4. Just to remind you and to revise and recapitulate, we saw that this turn from white planar geometry to rugged raw concrete brutalist finish was a blessing in disguise for India because our building technology and labor force could not provide the fine finishes required, and thus raw concrete finish became the new aesthetic which became widely popular globally under the movement called brutalism. Corbusier's impact on the composition ideas came long before he came to India, and he learned from India also about texture and richness of concrete that could be exploited sculpturally in the hands of the low skilled workers in India. The works also showed universal solutions for many concerns modern architects had. He, for example, in the Brise-Soleil he used in Monastery La Tourette, he used the modular scale to provide this kind of harmonic rhythm in the vertical sunbreakers. Corbusier's points for climatic responsive design in India, if were to bring them all together as one, then there would be the parasol or the umbrella, the Brise-Soleil or the sunbreaker, deep overhangs and verandas, dense greenery, water body and the roof garden. For example, in the Villa Savoye, how does sun protection happen? Through two methods. One is the parasol and the second is the Brise-Soleil. What is the parasol? The parasol is this flat roof. Basically, parasol is an umbrella. And the Villa Savoye is like this umbrella over these floors of the Villa Savoye. The umbrella is completely overshadowing the building. It is standing on pilotis and it is completely independent of the building, and thus it prevents direct solar radiation from entering the house. The second is this Brise-Soleil that has been provided in front in the rear of the building, which is also standing apart from the building and prevents sun glare from penetrating the building. Thus both the parasol and the Brise-Soleil increase the indoor thermal comfort in the building. Now let us come to a completely different concept, and it was called the Museum of Unlimited Growth by Le Corbusier. This idea came up in the initial point in the museum scheme he designed for Algeria, which was never built in 1939. What is the Museum of Unlimited Growth? It is a conceptual design he built in the 1930s and 40s, in which a museum can be expanded indefinitely over time like an organic structure by adding new gallery spaces as needed. So if we have the early museum, spirally we can keep on making the museum grow like a shell, and new gallery spaces added as per need of the museum. There is flexibility and adaptability, and the museum grows along with its collection. Now in the last presentation I told you that when I see certain terms used by an architect or concerning an architect's work, I am reminded of another architect or a modern architect who uses similar vocabulary and comes up with a different kind of space with that, like flexibility and adaptability. We will come back to these terms again when, for example, we will see the Lakeshore Drive apartments by Mies van der Rohe, where he uses flexibility in the plan, how the partition walls can be shifted and the plans of the apartments completely altered or having different combinations because of the structural system he has used, which is a steel frame. Now coming back to the Museum of Unlimited Growth, just to summarize, what is expected here is there will be an unlimited growth. The facade is not important. It's a spiral movement growth. There is a ramp and there is the use of the pilotis. So there are three museums that were built around this concept. There is the Sanskar Kendra in Ahmedabad, which was built in 1952 to 57, the Tokyo Museum of Western Art 57 to 59, the Government Museum and Art Gallery in Chandigarh from 1960 to 1968. This is the Government Museum in Chandigarh, and this is the Sanskar Kendra. This is the Government Museum, and this is the museum, and then the museum in Tokyo. Now, this shows the concept of unlimited growth in the Tokyo Museum extension. This is this concept. These two images show you the concept, and this is the final plan, the actual plan of the Tokyo Museum. Now, This museum in Tokyo is closest to the original concept of Museum of Unlimited Growth than the ones he made in India, because the Indian two museums had to adapt to our climatic conditions. Here also you will find that the building is standing on a pilotis. These are the plans of the Museum of Unlimited Growth, and it is covered by greenish pebbles on top in the facade of exposed concrete. These greenish pebbles are embedded over the exposed concrete. The overall finish, though it is in raw concrete, but it is a finer finished raw concrete than the buildings in India. So that shows the difference when we work with raw concrete in the third world versus the first world. In the buildings in Sanskar Kendra and the Chandigarh Museum, he used exposed bricks with concrete. Now this proposed square museum stands on pilotis just as he did in the Chandigarh Museum, and even in the Sanskar Kendra. The facade is almost blind with no windows except this opening here, and this emphasizes the horizontality of the composition. In fact, the same thing is pretty much true for Chandigarh and Sanskar Kendra. Most of the facade is almost blind with no windows. Le Corbusier again is a master of light. He impresses us with this double light space which is illuminated with this skylight. This is dramatic effect of this window which is above, and there is this cross beam that is provided here at the center of this triangular skylight, and it is supported by this freestanding central column. These are the views of the Tokyo Museum. This is the cross beam that has been provided, the freestanding column, and the light filtering in through this triangular opening. Then there is the amazing aesthetic composition. Now I told you that this finish, though it is raw finish, it is a much more finer raw finish than you would find in the buildings in India. So we find this aesthetic composition in the Tokyo Museum. Then the light. Light is never direct. The light, for example, in Ahmedabad is filtering from the top here and then entering in. The light in Tokyo is entering in from these skylights here and then entering in. And the light in Chandigarh again has these skylights and then it is entering into the museum. So these three pictures show you how the light is filtering within the museums. It is not direct light, it is indirect light. So when you see the exhibits, the light is not falling in a glare on your face. In the Guggenheim Museum also is the closest example we find of, outside of Corbusier, of a museum of unlimited growth. This spiral that Guggenheim Museum has actually is indicative of that it could go on endlessly. Now the volume, the block volume of Monastery La Tourette can be compared with the block volume of the Tokyo Museum. It also has geometrical forms, this also has geometrical forms. This shows us, as I probably mentioned earlier, that architects repeatedly continue to use those ideas, concepts, elements and forms that have met with success in their earlier buildings, that they have found that they are fascinating, they are working as an overall composition. So we find repeated use of certain elements and concepts in all great architects. Not only that, this repeated use of these certain concepts, elements, features, etc. gives a unique identity to their building. Looking at a building, we can easily know that there is a signature of the architect on that building. For example, let me just put it in front of you. You can easily identify a building today by Frank Gehry because of deconstructivism. You can pretty much easily identify a building of Santiago Calatrava because he works with completely white steel and the filigree of structural members, etc. You can pretty much identify the works of Zaha Hadid, to a certain extent of Renzo Piano, Norman Foster, and here also. For example, you could easily identify in the modernist early generation the works of Mies van der Rohe or even Frank Lloyd Wright, because there are these identifying signature elements and concepts in their buildings. Now we come to another aspect of his house construction. Because of this major shift from white planar geometry to raw concrete or a more rugged finish, he shifted his house design also For example, from Villa Savoye to two houses he designed together at 90 degrees to each other called the Maisons Jaoul. Maisons Jaoul. In plural, maison means house in French and houses. So Maison Jaoul. These two houses have been built. Now, in the Villa Savoye, if there is a flat roof, in the Maison Jaoul, there is a Catalan vault. If there is an open plan in Villa Savoye, then in Maisons Jaoul there are load-bearing brick walls. He has gone in the complete opposite direction. He himself had given up on load-bearing construction. By coming up with the domino system along with Max Dubois, he had completely rejected load-bearing construction and gone in for RCC frame. Now he comes back full circle to start using load-bearing construction here in the Maison Jaoul, and a few other houses he made like the Maison du Weekend and the Sarabhai house in India. Now again, if you compare the two, in Villa Savoye there is isolation, in the Maison Jaoul there is proximity. In the Villa Savoye there is pilotis, in the Maison Jaoul there is a closed plinth, and in both of them there are roof gardens. So leading from Maison Jaoul to Sarabhai house in 1955, there is exposed brick and concrete in both of them. They both have a Catalan vault. They both have greenery and primary colors. What is a Catalan vault? A Catalan vault comes from the region of Catalonia, and this is what a Catalan vault is. It is made, or Corbusier used this by made this by using terracotta tiles, rusticated brick, and raw concrete, béton brut. And he used it in like three houses I told you, Maison Jaoul, Maison du Weekend, and the Sarabhai house. A Sarabhai house is a hybrid because it not only has the concrete Catalan vaults of the Maison Jaoul, it also has the Brise-Soleil of Chandigarh, which is not there in Maison Jaoul because you don't need a Brise-Soleil or a sunbreaker in that climatic condition. It was meant for a hot climate and the prevalent construction industry in India. Now the Maison Jaoul to Sarabhai house, both are like two units which are perpendicular to each other. In the Sarabhai house, there is one separate unit which is perpendicular to the main house, and here there are these two units of Maison Jaoul which are at 90 degrees to each other. In the Maison Jaoul to Sarabhai house, the vaults, once they are waterproof, they are covered with earth, greenery takes hold, the upper part becomes a magnificent garden. In the Sarabhai house, in the Maison Jaoul, the vaulted system is control of the internal climate. The vaulted interiors allow for easy flow of cool monsoon air in the Sarabhai house. The rooftop garden increases the thermal mass and thus reduces heat gain from the roof. The swimming pool and shaded verandas in the rear of the house and the cool black Madras stone that he has used within the house lead to passive cooling of the building. Now, the cultural response along with the climatic response of the Sarabhai house, it addresses the cultural lifestyle. There is also a response of space with regard to endothermal comfort. The morning light penetrates the dining room, which helps to start the day from the dining room area, and the people are able to redefine space by using different spaces during different hours of the day where they find more thermal comfort. This is very similar to the idea that later Charles Correa had used in the Parekh house. Again, I would refer back to my presentation in Modern Indian Architecture to be able to study the Parekh house. The entire house, because of this way the spaces are used throughout the day, becomes an integral part of the daily routine of the occupants, and the pool is providing the relief from heat in the rear of the building. Now the scale and proportion of the Sarabhai house is also built around the Le Modulor of Corbusier. Now the Brise-Soleil on the south facade has the rhythm of the shaded arcade of Fatehpur Sikri. This is the shaded arcade of Fatehpur Sikri, and this is the Brise-Soleil facade of the rear of the Sarabhai house. This is a slide provided in the rear of the Sarabhai house from the roof to the pool, very similar to the Jantar Mantar. Now, how did the Sarabhai house and this relation with Maison Jaoul impact Indian architects? tremendously. Because of the interest and imitation in West, this link between Maisons Jaoul and Sarabhai House assured Indian architects the design of Sarabhai House is a part of mainstream global design thought. Sarabhai House is in tune with climate, materials and socio-cultural context of India. Therefore, modernism could be fit into a local context in India. This is a very important statement because this would then lead to the development or the moving towards a regional modernism or what is called as critical regionalism defined by Kenneth Frampton. We will come back to critical regionalism a little later in our series. Now, Corbusier's specific geometric forms attracted Indian architects because they solved specific architectural problems and also coincided with specific Indian images like the Catalan vault similar to the vaulted roof we find in the Buddhist Chaitya halls. And Corbusier used this Catalan vault like I told you in Maison du Weekend, Maison Jaoul and in Villa Sarabhai. This is the Catalan vault again in the Villa Sarabhai along with the black Madras stone in the flooring. Now, another evolution we find, for example, in the Ahmedabad Mill Owners Association building. I will not be going into the detail again because this I have discussed in the Modern Indian Architecture series. But what we find is the relationship between an earlier international style house called Maison Cook that he had designed. Because in the Maison Cook, there is both sheer walls and there are a couple of pilotis within the house. Again in Ahmedabad, this is similar building, there are sheer walls and there are these freestanding pilotis. The addition that has been made here as different from Maison Cook is the Brise-Soleil provided a freestanding Brise-Soleil at 45 degrees in the front of the building and a straight Brise-Soleil in the rear of the building. Both are little away, standing away from the building. Now, the number of additions to and subtractions from a cube as happened in Villa Cook or Maison Cook also happens in the MOA building. The structural system, like I told you, is a combination of shear walls and pilotis. Again, in Corbusier's earlier idea of Maison Cook, the idea of villas adopted in monumental public buildings is what we find in MOA, and the work here in Maison Cook was white planar geometry, but in MOA it is raw concrete béton brut. Large spaces with freestanding staircase you find here in MOA as we find in Maison Cook. We find curved walls in Maison Cook as we find curved walls in MOA. Further influence, Carpenter Center in Harvard is 1963 is very similar derivation to the MOA he did in Ahmedabad in 1954. The only difference again is that if we look at the Ahmedabad Mill Owners Association building, the Brise-Soleil for example, and the one using Carpenter Center, you find there it is a finer finish. The difference of making a building in the first world and in the third world. So, we find the series of evolutions taking place from Maison Cook to the Ahmedabad Mill Owners Association building to the Carpenter Center in Harvard. One last building is the Pavillon Le Corbusier in Switzerland. In the very final years of his life from 1960 to 1965, Corbusier passed away in 1965. This building was very different from all his works. The one person who worked predominantly with RCC all his life did this building in steel and glass. He was using bright primary colors as you would find in Mondrian panels. Mondrian panel primary color plates were used by these style architects, which was again a subset movement within modernism. There is a free floating butterfly-like roof made of enameled sheet metal over the building. There are modular proportions according to the only modular scale, metal and glass construction, but there is no béton brut in this building. This exhibits Corbusier's modular system, his artwork in the use of primary colors and his design philosophy overall. There is also comparison. There was a museum built in Chandigarh called the Chandigarh Architecture Museum by S.D. Sharma, which is very similar in its design form to Pavillon Le Corbusier, except that Pavillon Le Corbusier is in glass and steel, and the Chandigarh Architecture Museum is in exposed raw concrete. So again, coming back to the repetitive elements in the work of Le Corbusier, there is the Brise-Soleil, there are the vertical sunbreakers in a harmonic rhythm based on the Modulor, there is brutalism, there are pure geometric forms, and there are the use of primary colors. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list. If I were to sit down and put the list together of his first and second phase, the list of such features and elements would be much larger. This is the parasols and pergolas. Corbusier came up with the parasol. Here we find it in this house, we find it in the Villa Savoye. Many other architects like Convinde, like Charles Correa and other architects used it as a parasol directly here, like by Convinde, or in cases like Charles Correa, they turned that into a pergola. Then there are freestanding staircases. We find a freestanding staircase in IIT Delhi, Institute of Indology, Hall of Nations, NCDC building by Kuldeep Singh in New Delhi. In conclusion, Corbusier pioneered modern architecture with clean lines, open plans and functional design. He introduced the 5 points of a new architecture and brought in the human-based modular system. He used materials like concrete, glass and steel in innovative ways, and he left behind a lasting impression with the coming up or with the rise or definitive works on brutalism. He designed iconic buildings like the Villa Savoye, the Ronsham Chapel, United Habitation, and of course his swan song, the city of Chandigarh. He blended technology with human needs and left behind a global impact of his architecture. We'll end here with Le Corbusier and we'll continue here on from here onwards with Mies van der Rohe. Thank you.